Strolling along with my girl, holding her by her hand. Me God, me King, he named Jehovah. He inspired me to be a mic chanter. The greatest thing about reading is that it gives you a concept of somebody else. And no matter where you start from, what usually happens is you learn, and you learn I think I learn when I read, is how other people think. So I'm going to start with a little bit of reading. My mother and father arrived in the UK from the island of Barbados and quickly became friends with other migrants from the West Indies to begin a new life in the UK, but with no real intention to stay. They planned to return to Barbados once they'd earned enough money to purchase land and build a house, buy a car, and continue living the life they had left behind. However, once in the UK, they found life more difficult and expensive than they initially imagined. One of the most devastating facts about my family was that my mother's father was murdered after winning a case for a community mother where she defended and was ordered to pay the cost of equivalent of £60 in 1955, seeking retribution and harbouring feelings. She paid 2 men to kill my grandfather. As the story goes, they followed him many nights until one night they met and knocked him dead with a sledgehammer. They were both found guilty of his murder and were sentenced to be hanged by the neck until they were dead. My mother has always remembered that story, and it scared me for life. What a loss. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so the first thing that I would really like to ask you is how, after all these years, after decades of working in the music industry, how did you decide now that it was the right time to write this book?
That's a really interesting, and why I say it's interesting is because I didn't naturally wake up and think this is the right time. My son, my eldest son, I've got 2 grandchildren and a third one on the way. And he said to me, "What do I tell the grandchildren, Dad? You know."
About you?
Yeah. And I said, "Tell them what you know.
Play them some records."
Yeah. He said, "But there's so much. Where do I start?" So I said, "You start at the beginning." He said, "I don't know about the beginning. You and Mum know that." And I went, "Okay." He said, "You got to write something down." By the time I'd finished writing stuff down, I had written about 30,000 words.
Only about the beginning, so your first couple of years.
So once I recognised that I'd written a dissertation, I decided, wow, my first dissertation for my first degree was 10,000 words. My second dissertation for my master's degree was 20,000 words. So I'd written two dissertations. And I thought to myself, okay, this does look like a book, and A lot of people have said to me, you got to write a book, Grantley.
Okay, so this book that we're talking about, The British Reggae Music Industry, a subtitle is also A Windrush Legacy.
Yes.
Maybe for all those who haven't read their book yet, and maybe are not so familiar with the term, can you explain quickly what does that refer to, the Windrush generation?
The Windrush generation is the generation of African Caribbeans born in the Caribbean, whether it was Jamaica, Barbados, St. Kitts, and the other Caribbean islands, when England had finished the war, the Second World War, 1945, the country was smashed. And it needed rebuilding. So they wanted people to drive the buses, they wanted nurses to work in the hospitals, they wanted cleaners, they wanted a lot of different people, builders, and so on and so forth. They called upon the Caribbean, people of the Caribbean, to come to the UK to rebuild the country. Now, here's the factor. At the time, the Caribbean were colonies to the UK. So Barbados was a colony, Jamaica was a colony. They were colonized. So, everybody that came to the UK came on a British passport. Now, here comes the factor. When they arrived, it was okay for a while until, just like normally happens, people get disgruntled and they say, why are all these foreign people here? And a guy called Enoch Powell, he wrote a speech, and he was a Conservative Wolverhampton MP, and he wrote a speech called Rivers of Blood, coining the phrase that if immigration didn't stop, that the black man would have the whip hand of the white man, and the country would be overrun by immigrants, because now Asian people were also coming from abroad. To put another person, Irish people were coming from abroad. So when you were looking for housing, they would have in the windows no blacks, no Irish, no dogs.
Horrible.
So, if that wasn't enough, later down, the government, the Conservative government under Theresa May, said that we're going to deport anybody that wasn't a British citizen, which meant because members of the Windrush generation hadn't applied for citizenship, they could be deported.
So, didn't you just say before that they arrived with English passports?
That's right. But they had to trade in their British passports and become naturalised and gain citizenship. And they felt, and what happened as a result is those people had already been there for 20, 30, 40 years. So it was felt to be unfair that those people should have sought citizenship. And that's where the Windrush scandal came in.
I think Germany did kind of like a similar thing in the 50s, 60s, 70s to invite people from Turkey, for example, or Italy to come over here and work and help rebuild the country.
Yeah.
So, of course, there was also some subculture that emerged from that. Like, for example, I only learned a little bit more about it when I watched a documentary that I would like to recommend to everyone.
Yeah.
Liebe D-Mark und der Tod. A great watch about the Turkish subculture in Germany. So it was the first time for me to understand, to learn that there was so much happening, like so much Turkish music being produced in Germany. However, they never managed that, or they never managed, it just didn't happen that they would enter the mainstream. Like their tapes and records weren't even being sold in regular record shops. It was like a complete parallel culture. So I wonder, how was it possible then for Caribbean immigrants in the UK to enter the music industry or build a whole new branch of music despite like heavy racism?
Well, this is where it becomes really, really interesting. You've got bands like Steel Pulse, Aswad, the Cimarrons, bands like that formed when their parents were here, and they then became indoctrinated and they loved reggae music that came from Jamaica. So what took place then is that they started to learn to play their instruments. They started to get this music. But what these British bands would write about was what they were experiencing: resistance, racism, issues to do with, having to struggle with being poor and being set aside from the normal groups of people. I like politics, current affairs, mainly because in our house, mainly the discussion topics was about that. I never met either of my grandfathers, but I heard much about them. Known in Barbados, the main grandfather, because he was a fireside lawyer. And a fireside lawyer, just to give you an example, was somebody who read books and learned the law from just reading without going to university and getting a degree. I was privy to the do's and don'ts of living in a foreign country, and I found it fascinating. I remember my father and his friends discussing the Prime Ministers of Barbados, Grantley Adams, Errol Barrow, Tom Adams, Owen Arthur. I would ask questions like, who was he and what he did? These men assisted poor people in having running water, providing primary schooling, etc. However, no one spoke about slavery. I always believed that Barbados was a country steeped in history, similar to the UK. I had no concept that my family's origins were African. My family consisted of my mum, my dad, and 3 sisters. We lived in Birmingham, UK, like many other. Life began with us sharing one room. We later moved into a back alley house, followed by a 3-4 bedroom house in St. Martin's Flats. St. Martin's Flats was like Colditz. It was a row of houses that was around and around and around, and one big centre point where fights would happen sometimes. I was part of one of the fights at times, before finally moving to Borsall Heath, which is an area of Birmingham with a subculture of people that were migrating and pretty much a low standard. I shared many fun moments with my sisters and my mum and dad. One significant comfort was the music that they were accustomed to followed them. Known at the time as blue beat, ska and rocksteady. Later on, as the population of West Indians arrived, wholesalers began importing records from Jamaica and selling them to mobile distributors and into local shops in the cities like London, Birmingham, Manchester, just to name a few.
So I wonder now, we're in the 60s, 70s, like you mentioned, reggae icons like Bob Marley or the Burning Spear came to the UK. Reggae got more, like a wider audience, more popularity. British bands start to form, get a chance to perform and support these Jamaican artists. And then slowly but surely an entirely new British version of reggae is forming.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about lovers rock now.
Yes.
So if we are in such a period where there's rebellion in so many people, why do you think it was lovers rock out of all the possible fusions of reggae music? Why wasn't it not like a more punky version?
First of all, there was bands like Steel Pulse.
Yeah.
Now, the song that Steel Pulse got really popular with was Ku Klux Klan. Mm. This was before lovers rock. Okay? Now, the guy who popularized lovers rock was a guy called from Barbados called Dennis Bovell. He wrote Silly Games, which was sung by Janet Kay. And around that time, yeah, there was Carol Thompson as well, who wrote Hopelessly in Love and I'm So Sorry, big songs like that. That form of reggae became popular because young African Caribbeans like me, we were going to dances and we were dancing close to the wall with a young lady. So that was popular. That was all the rage. Mm. So a lot of people found it easier to write songs about love, mm-hmm. as, you know, similar to the Beatles and similar to a lot of European acts, mm-hmm. and British acts. Because mm-hmm. it is nice to write songs about love, isn't it? Love's a great thing. But when you're really serious about the songs that you want to write, you write about resilience, mm-hmm. you write about pain, you write about hurt, you write about injustice.
So another kind of distinct British reggae music element that you also mention in your book is the so-called fast style.
Yeah.
Of MCs like Tipper Irie also, yeah. I guess. Like, how did that develop? And do you think it was the lovers rock as well, all this together? Was there like a conscious endeavor to build something uniquely British, or how did that develop? How that developed is there was, you know, everybody must have heard a little bit about Saxon International. Now, Saxon was a sound system, a young sound system that had young owners that looked at things differently
So Maxi Priest came from Saxon. Now Maxi Priest used to sing culture songs, but after a little while, Maxi started to write songs that were about love, and one of those songs were Strolling On, or Strolling On, strolling along with my girl, holding her by her hand. But also, what made Saxon predominantly what young people wanted to listen to was the fast style. That was developed by a guy called Stephen Peterkin. Me neat, me sweet, me know for do it. Me neat, me sweet, me know for do it. So he would rap like that to the beat, and the crowd would go crazy. And Saxon created this style where as soon as the crowd would go crazy, they would tell the crowd to lick wood. Yeah? So licking wood would be hitting and stamping on the ground, and it would be like a tornado going through the place. So they drew huge crowds, in excess of 4,000 people sometimes. So if you can imagine that in a dance hall, that's excitement, isn't it? So a lot of other MCs, even Maccabee, British, would do that style. That style captivated British youth. Tipper Irie would do another track, you know. Yes, I'm rolling, thinking about my chanting. And he would do the fast style. Daddy Colonel would do the fast style. Papa Levi would do the fast style. And then other MCs that were coming through like Pato Banton, he would do the fast style. So that's the fast style. And that propelled British reggae music right across the world. Papa Levi's Me God Me King became a number one in Jamaica. So you can see how far it went.
Also, maybe for those who aren't aware, you've been working as a manager,
Yeah.
as a promoter, as a producer, like for many years, and I think also internationally, right? For example, you talk about touring in America. What's your impression of reggae fans and artists nowadays, how they are looking at the Windrush generation, or like the originators in the 70s and 80s? Do you think there's a lot of awareness for these first people to ever, like, to build up the industry in England? Do they get their due respect?
They do, but the one thing that I've noticed that's lacking, and you will know this, is there's not too many books, is there, that tell you that there's a British reggae music industry. There's not too much people that write about it. Even Dennis Bovell, who is primary, hasn't written a book. Mm-hmm. Even Janet Kay hasn't written a book. Carol Thompson, Tipper's written a book. Pato's written a book. General Levy's written a book. However, but the marketing of this kind of literature, it almost is shortcoming. So what we need, we really do need, is people to really concentrate on marketing the literature because that's how people like yourselves get to know more. And that's what's missing. Because we've got social media now, and soon from now we're going to have AI, and this book will be digitalized. That means it will reach a bigger audience. That means there'll be more people that want to listen to the story, that are interested in how Maxi Priest started, or how Pat O'Banton started, or how the British reggae music business started, and the artists that have come from that. Producers, reggae artists need to think differently. They now need to think, what do I really want? Am I in this because I love it? Or am I in this because I want to make money? And be honest about it. Because if you want to make money, you have to now embrace people to invest in your product.
Voila.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
And the DJ is your best friend.
DJ, please play some music.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, there's always